what are you guys doing these days?
We are touring extensively. We are in the studio working on, we don't have a record deal yet, but we have a number of companies that are interested in putting an album out on us, and we are working on material toward that effect right now. One of the tunes, a song called Run Run Away, happens to be a song about child abuse that we just cut a video on, and is getting a fair amount of national attention. I've taken it to a bunch of radio stations in the cities where we play, and it's getting airplay in Texas and California and heavily in Colorado and some other things. So we're getting an airplay on a new song that's not even on an album yet, not being released.
Right. Without a single, without any kind of record available. Huh?
Yeah, it's just getting airplay, and it's a very, as you know, being child abuse, very topical song. Very emotional song, pretty much just light acoustic guitar, flute, vocals. And then we found out today, we have been, Atlantic, our ex-record company, is finally putting out some CDs on us. They, for a long time, had talked themselves into that there was no demand for Firefall CDs, and that it would be a waste of time and their money and effort to put out CDs on our catalog. And then we find out that that in a magazine called CD Review in July, last issue, that we were listed of the top 100 albums out that aren't available on CD. That we were listed as, the first album of ours was listed as number 20 most requested, and our second album, Luna Sea, was listed as number 32 most selected, which I was very amazed to find out how many Elton John records weren't on CD, Joe Walsh records, and the topmost one was like Buckingham Nicks and stuff. But that helped us, that information, that independent confirmation that in fact there was a lot of people out there requesting Firefall CDs, has finally persuaded our ex-record company, Atlantic, who in fact is one of the companies that is interested in signing us again for a new record deal. They finally are now starting to put CDs on us. And that, in fact, that single fact was the one item that was holding the band back financially and career-wise in the last 5 years. That single fact has hindered us more than any other thing.
What, that the stuff was not on CD?
Yeah, and because you go into record stores that only sell CDs, and Firefall was non-existent, even though we sold 5 million records in our time, and that we still got a hell of a lot of airplay in classic rock stations, etc. So that a lot of people knew who we were, but there was a whole generation of people out there that didn't know who we were because we weren't in record stores anymore. So anyway, finally, and one of the things that I tried to persuade Atlantic was that for some reason they wouldn't put it out domestically, but they licensed our first album, Firefall, in Europe, in Germany, and it was out of something like 20,000 titles this German CD company had. Our first album was one of their big sellers, and we couldn't persuade them. So finally, they have seen the light and are now starting to put out at least one, if not 2 or 3 of our catalog on CDs, which means we're on the list. They are backlogged of albums they want to do that with. So now that's a major step, and
So this could push the new stuff too, right?
Well, yeah. In fact, we had kind of figured, well, the only way they're going to do it is to have us get a new album. And once we got a new album, Atlantic, just because of the business of it all, would say, oh my God, Firefall has a new album out, let's put their whole catalog out, we don't want to miss out on any dollars to be made. And they even in fact said that they would do that. But at the same time, they would not take the initiative and put out CDs, you know, before that fact. They, in fact, for the longest time, so Rhino Records had decided, they had done some research and had seen how much market was out there for our CDs, and had decided to, if they could work out a deal with Atlantic on leasing the stuff like they do with a lot of labels, put out a new best of Firefall on CD, and you know, and put 14 or 15 cuts on it, and maybe even a new song. In fact, they heard Run, Run Away and went, yeah, we'll put that one on there. This would be great, blah, blah, blah. And Atlantic wouldn't let them. You know,
they're going to do it now.
Well, they didn't, but then, see, they said, no, we're not going to let Rhino or Rykodisc do it, but we're not going to do it either. So we were between a rock and a hard place. But so now that seems to have been, knock on wood, you know, that one has kind of been resolved. So now our old record company has seen the light and is going to put some stuff out, and we are pursuing on new stuff right now, and it's looking pretty good.
So tell me about the new stuff. What kinds of things are you guys recording?
Well, let me put it this way. Let me put it in a historical perspective. First of all, Firefall, when we came out in the 70s, the only singles that Atlantic deemed really that were going to be hits, and consequently were the only ones that they pushed, and the only ones that they would decide to put out as singles, were the soft ballad acoustic guitar things, like You Are the Woman and Just Remember I Love You and Strange Way, and a lot of big hits. But they wouldn't put out the other side of us, the rock and roll side. Now, when you bought an old record of ours, you know, there was 2 or 3 or 4 ballads and kind of mid-tempo stuff, and then we had at least half an album's worth of rock and roll. And now, by no means hard rock and roll. I'm not saying that we were a heavy metal band or anything, but we really rocked out, and all our live concerts, you know, reflected that. You know, so that we kind of, the point of that part of the rap is that we got pigeonholed into this rap on us that was, oh, Firefall, that light rock band from the 70s, because of You Are the Woman and Just Remember I Love You and stuff. You know, and which was fairly inaccurate. At the time, we didn't really care because we just, you know, it was great having any top 10 hit. You know, oh great, you know, and then, but by the time we realized what the trend was, you know, it was too late. We'd already been pigeonholed as, you know, that light rock band thing. So that then, after our decline started happening, we, and one by one, some of the members of the band were leaving. I started particularly trying to update the Firefall song sound into the 80s, you know, and use new production techniques, and still use acoustic guitar and vocals and stuff, but at the same time, get more rock and roll, which was really going to reflect more of where we were really at, okay? And I ended up, you know, once everybody left the band, I ended up being the leader of the band and the owner of the name, because I was the only guy who didn't leave before. I was the only guy that didn't quit. So I kind of, by default, became owner of the band, owner of the name. And in the 80s, okay, first of all, we got the rap that, well, I really like this song, and it sounds great on the air, but that's not Firefall. Firefall's You Are the Woman, and Just Remember I Love You. So in the 80s, a lot of the radio people around the country wanted Firefall to sound like we had in the 70s. But the catch-22 of that is that a Firefall that sounded like that in the 80s, sounded 70s in the 80s, wouldn't have gotten played in most radio stations because we wouldn't have fit their format. Because the face of pop music changed so much in the 80s away from anything that was acoustic guitar and vocals. Like, you know, for instance, you know, the Eagles or Dan Fogelberg or, you know, or Firefall or acts like us had a lot of trouble in the 80s. Well, the Eagles were broken up, but Fogelberg, didn't knock them dead, and we didn't, and bands like that had trouble. Acoustic bands or acoustic guitar-based bands had trouble in pop music in the 80s, other than say John Cougar and maybe Talking Heads, which used acoustic guitar in a kind of avant-garde type of way. But it was really tough, and so they didn't want our kind of music was out of popularity in the 80s, and Firefall couldn't get a record deal. And at that point, and that's at the same time as I was trying to update the band sound into the 80s and make us more rock and roll and a little bit more maybe synthesizer oriented and and everything, but still with big vocals. We were told a number of times in the 80s, you guys should go country because you're already acoustic guitar and big vocal parts, and that's what's happening in country, and look at how country has changed and blah blah blah. And I love country music, and I've been in some country bands and stuff, but I knew that, Firefall is not really a country band. We're a acoustic rock band. Okay, so now that gets us to the 90s, and to your original question. Suddenly in the 90s, things have opened up big time, and it really seems like just about anything goes. You can have, Vanilla Ice on one hand, heaven forbid, and then you can have like the Byrds reunion or Roger McGuinn album that sounds like the Byrds of the 1960s, and you can have, Tracy Chapman's and stuff with just one acoustic guitar, and you can have, huge big bands, and, anything goes now. And really, the 90s have really opened up new possibilities for Firefall. And in fact, so here's the answer to your question. Our new material, for a long time, for a number of years in the 80s, I considered that we needed to modernize, And in fact, two of our records that came out in 82 and 84 really didn't do anything for two reasons. The label was not behind it, that was the main reason. But the other reason was that the music really didn't sound as much like Firefall as it could have and maybe should have. I had a new lead singer. Rick Roberts was not back in the band then. And this guy didn't sound like Rick, although he was a great singer, and we were, less acoustic guitar and stuff. But we didn't really sound like Firefall anymore. And I was really trying to modernize us, and get us into the 80s, People wouldn't let us out of the 70s. So nowadays, and I realized this a long time ago, but we've been, as a band now, putting it into practice. The main thing that sells to me in music, or one of the main elements of music, is honesty. Okay, and and that doesn't mean to say that some dishonest or some some kind of charlatans are out there being incredibly successful. But when in our kind of brand of music, when you get out there and play something you're not, it's picked up. The audiences and crowds and everything are very perceptive. So that anyway, here's the answer to your question. We are now playing music that sounds a lot like Firefall and is very acoustic guitar based and with big vocals, and it is really true to what we are. And at the same time, we are having, so anyway, sounding like what we did in the 70s is no longer scary. Okay, and we are in fact putting that veneer of modernity through new production techniques, and just basically studios have come along such a long way in 20 years, that even, if we were to take the original band, which we're not, with all the original players, it would sound different slightly because of just how studios have progressed. Okay, so anyway, we are now playing really acoustic-based rock and roll that is hopefully very honest and not trying to be something we're not. If we put out dance music as Firefall, it would be ludicrous. If we put out, whatever. That you see my point. So anyway, we are playing a lot of new music that is really really cool stuff that is very reminiscent of the 70s. But at the same time, it sounds like the 90s and modern. So, and that's what we had been looking for all along, was to try to find this balance between the old decade that we were popular in and the new decade, which at that time was the 80s. I was thinking, God, we gotta, but now we're in the 90s and it's opened up, and we said, there's a couple of songs that will be on the record that are very produced and very modern. Well, I don't know, what is modern? I mean, you can have one acoustic guitar and bass and drums and have it sound incredibly modern, so that anyway, we're not trying to be modern anymore, we're trying to be true to what we are, and it seems to be working real well.
Well, I think there's your answer in terms of the 90s. I think that audiences aren't afraid to listen to what they want to hear, instead of being hip, you know what I mean?
What is hip? I mean, there was a couple of bands that I really, really loved in the 80s, like the Police and stuff. But by and large, I really felt that the 80s was kind of like a wasteland of, cool music. There was a lot of bullshit out there. And maybe that was, quite honestly, maybe part of that was my frustration with not being part of it again on a big level, because we were real big in the 70s and the first year or two of the 80s, and then suddenly we're back in the pack of the mid-successful, those has-been guys, And it was really frustrating, because I thought we had really a lot to say, and we toured a lot, and we really got crowds off wherever we played, but, we weren't making the big bucks, and we weren't playing the big venues unless we, went and opened for the Beach Boys or did something like that. So now things are really coming around again, and we are gearing up to a new record and a new manager and a new outlook and everything here, come say about the first of the year, or February or March or something.
So you're looking at a renaissance for Firefall.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Really, and frankly, I was looking for a renaissance. See, I've been in the band for now, Jesus Christ, 18 years or something. 15, well, at least 15. We formed in 74, played in 75 getting our sound together, and then suddenly our album hit at the very first part of 76, and we were big stars right out of the box, and and it was like, it was great and everything, but I have been trying to bring Firefall back ever since our decline in the early 80s, and really, trying to be very optimistic about my chances. Well, I will have to tell you very honestly that was part of that was a unrealistic optimism, or kind of just wishful thinking, because the times were not right, nor the material, nor the players, nor the everything. But for the first time in 10 years, I really feel really good about where we're at and our chances of getting a record deal, and and everything. It really feels good, and it's not just me that feels that. It's our business people, and it's the guys in the band are real excited, and we're writing tunes, and I think one of the things that is an indication of that is that we're collaborating. We'll rehearse and get practicing and work out, and stuff, and like I'll play, or somebody will play a groove, just out of the blue, and then suddenly everybody's playing it and it feels great, and we end up writing a song, we end up doing these band collaborations where that used to never happen, at least for us. Everything, all the songs were, songs that, somebody brought to the band, and like Rick Roberts would write a song, and then we'd all work it out, or I'd write a song and we'd work it out and everything, but it was one guy, writing, or two guys or whatever. But now we're having a number of band collaborations, which really feels good.
So the band is actually progressing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So is Rick still involved?
He wasn't for a long time. He was the last guy to leave out of the old band, and then his replacement, after being in the band for the bulk of the 80s and really thinking that, let's do it and everything, really kind of got tired of getting nowhere, or at least just kind of touring, endlessly with no new product and, staying on this one level that we'd been on. And he got an offer to go play with somebody else, which was Dion DiMucci, I guess his name was, and gave me his notice. And I thought, well, I need a lead singer. And then Rick Roberts had been in a band with Randy Meisner from the Eagles. And right about that time, Randy and all the rest of the Poco guys reformed Poco. And in fact, that's another example of 70s kind of thing, being successful and working, and and that is Poco, and now suddenly everybody back then is putting out albums, and I think they realize how hard it is to make a living in the rock world, and and that they go back and look at the Doobie Brothers or the Righteous Brothers, or everybody's making a comeback. But and frankly, some of them I feel it's just an artificial comeback. It's like, or it's a financial one. We need to make some money, and boy, didn't we have it good back when we didn't know we had it so good, and all this stuff. And, they don't really have any great material anymore, and, it's just kind of a financially based kind of thing. Well, I really feel, and of course I would say this, you would expect me to say this anyway, but I really feel that we have a lot of really good material, and that was the strength of Firefall all along, was our songs, and then the singers that sang them, but particularly the songs, and now I've really progressed as a writer, in evidenced by the song Run Away, which everybody's calling it my best song ever, which I'm really kind of too close to it to really know if that's the case or not. But it wrote itself in about 20 minutes, and it was done, and was so emotional. And about really what it's about is the adult victims of child abuse, and carrying around that weight, whatever that weight may be, and whatever happened in a non-specific kind of way, for you your whole life, and that it's a very hopeful song. And in fact, that song has led us into, like, I presented the song, I don't know if you know who John Bradshaw is, internationally known lecturer and writer, about his whole groove is healing the wounded inner child. And he loved the song and is thinking about using it for some of his deals. And we're doing, we got involved a little bit with the John Elway Foundation, played at a benefit of theirs for their child abuse thing, and are doing a thing up in Estes Park here coming next month, which is for the Children's Hospital Burn Victims Camp, which in fact a lot of these kids who are 18 and between the ages of 8 and 18 were deliberately, like, their abusive father or somebody tried to burn the house down with all the kids in it, and here's some kid who's screwed up physically for life, was burnt 90% of his body, seriously, all this kind of stuff, and they're having to deal with that kind of stuff, and they've asked us, having heard this song on KBCO and KDHT, if we'd come up, either just a couple of us, and sing this song and talk to the kids, and that would make their year. And it was like, oh yeah. So I mean, that song being very, very honest, and very emotional and hard hitting. And I've played it for some people who broke down crying. And there's one girl I played it for, was like, she was, big tears in her eyes, and it's like, it really hits home. And not that every song is like that. We do have some light love songs and stuff, but there's a bunch of tunes that are very topical. There's this one environmental song that's Peter Gabriel-ish, or whatever. So anyway, we have a lot of great new songs, and I frankly don't really think that I would be really trying to keep doing this after all these years, if I didn't feel we had, if I felt our comeback was based on a lie or on bullshit or whatever. So I really feel that we've got a lot of good songs. Now, we are going to play one or two of them. We don't have a lot of the new ones in the set yet. We do have 2 or 3 of them, okay? So that when we do play up in Fort Collins, we'll play at least 1 or 2 new songs.
Including the Run Away?
Probably, yeah. That song is a little bit hard to pull off live at this point. we really need to rehearse it just because it's so sparse, you know, and it sounds so great from the studio, just being acoustic guitar and vocals, a little flute, a little shaker, you know. I mean, those kind of songs are hard to pull off live. It's much easier to pull off some smoke and rock song
Sure.
when everybody's playing, but this way it's like, boy, you have to be totally under control, and the singing is so important that, you know, everybody's got to be spot on with their parts, and, you know, it's tough. But we have been playing it live. We play a couple other tunes from the package that is being shopped right now, and we are going in the studio again soon, you know, to cut 3 or 4 more songs. So things are really looking up, and we're all real excited about where things are at now. And we've been, I wouldn't say struggling, but we've been existing on a national. I'm not bitching by any means, because there's a lot of great musicians, not only in Colorado, but in all over the country, who can't get a break and will never get out of the club scene they're stuck in. I fortunately am not stuck in that club scene, and stuck at making however much they make, $400 or $500 for the band a night and stuff. But we, for a number of years, were stuck in that groove that was the kind of the lower end of being able to go out and really make a living on the road. Now I've been touring, United States, and get into Canada. We're talking about and stuff. So I'm, like I said, I'm not complaining. But suddenly, we're being asked to do, and they're negotiating a 2-week tour of Brazil and Peru. They are talking about 2 weeks in Japan, which Firefall did play Japan in 1979 or 80 and did real well. But without a new record out, it's really amazing that they even want to have us before our new record's out. So I mean, and evidently I have heard, and it's being checked into right now, that an album, our first album, was re-released in Holland and was charted in the top, in the top 40 in Holland, and getting a lot of airplay. And we're going, well, let's turn that into touring Holland, so that suddenly there's a lot of shit happening for us that it's like, let's go for this, we're happening.
Well, it's looking up, huh?
It's definitely looking up. So
right.
That seems to be kind of the gist of what we got going.